At the Halifax, we can help make your home a more sustainable one. Just sign up to one of our online events in partnership with Energy Saving Trust and find out how to make your home more energy efficient. So whether you want to learn how to insulate your home, find out more about draft proofing, or just discover other sustainable home solutions, we can help. Visit halifax.co.uk/home events to find out more. Halifax, it's a people thing.
Welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK radio network. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and as always, we're joined by Richard Clements. Hello, Richard. Hello. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm quite looking forward to this one. It's a little bit different because you probably sort of realised that Paul introduced me first.
Yeah, absolutely, because we actually gave Kerry the night off tonight. Or for this week anyway, just because she deserves it. She deserves a bit of a pamper, so she's off having a pamper tonight, having her nails done, and so she can come back into the studio looking as glamorous as ever. That's our excuse. We'll stick to that.
Yeah, and you know what they say, and whilst the cat's away, the mice will.
Absolutely. So we're going to tackle a subject that Kerry doesn't really like that much. I can't imagine why, because the imagination is endless to this subject. We're going to be talking about UFOs and interdimensional beings tonight, and that is why tonight we are joined in the studio by Chris Marais.
That's
Hello,
fine.
Chris.
How you guys doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. We thought as soon as this subject come up, we was like, who can we ask to come on the show? Oh, we know, Chris Marais. He'll be all over this.
Yeah.
We hope.
Yeah, we hope. No, it's always awesome talking to you guys. So I appreciate it. Hopefully, we have some good conversation about it.
Okay, so for the people that didn't catch you on the last show that we did, could you just reintroduce yourself for us?
Yeah, I was a police officer just outside New York City. Retired, moved down to South Carolina with my kids, and when I moved down here, I got involved in some. I can volunteer to be a law enforcement officer. I can volunteer for our state militia, and then I got reintroduced into MOUFON by a couple of people that I had met. And, my background was always interest in paranormal, MOUFON. Well, the paranormal, in the way I view it, as it pertains to like UFOs and UAP. And so I joined MOUFON back, I think 2013, I joined. And then I went through the field investigator portion of it. You have to get some books, and you have to read them, and then you have to take a test, and it's kind of a process. And so I've been doing that with them for I'm going about 5 years now, and I've completed over 120 cases so far. They'll get a case in the state, and then the director will pass it out to various field investigators. And a couple of years ago, she made me the upstate section director for the northern counties in South Carolina. So up until COVID last year, I had meetings at a local, well, actually two libraries, but one, it was a little more centralized, so I got a better response to it. But then when COVID came, of course, they shut everything down. So I'm trying to get it back together, but so they wanted to place too many restrictions on the meeting room stuff. And they want no more than 5 people in the room with masks, and they want a bunch of, distance requirements. And I just think that right now, with the way it's going. People would just be a little bit too afraid with the restrictions to come in. It's either you come in and you enjoy yourself, or you're afraid of getting sick, so you're not. So I think I'm just going to put off for a little while and see how it goes. And that's it. I raised my kids, and I'm just chilling out with my dogs over here. I got a 16-year-old Karen Terrier, and who thinks she's a pit bull because the pit bulls don't bother her because she'll bite them. So, and I've enjoyed being on you guys' show and talking to you before. So,
and for those who don't know, can you just tell us a little bit about the MOUFON? Sure.
So MOUFON was it's an organization that was started back in 1969, and it's actually a conglomerate of several smaller UFO groups, investigative groups from the Midwest, from the Ohio River Valley, that area. And when they got a little bigger, and then they had, crossovers and everything, so they became one organization. And their preamble is just a group of volunteers from all walks of life who donate their time in the hopes of collecting enough data through research, interviews, to eventually find out the origins and purpose of these objects that people claim to be seen. And MOUFON has, I belong to what's called a STAR team, which is a rapid response. So in the event you get a sighting that demands someone respond quickly, somebody says there was a landing in their property, or there's evidence that needs to be collected, well, then you'd go out and do that. But MOUFON has their headquarters is out in California, in Irvine, and they actually have a laboratory where you can collect evidence, and as long as you properly bag it and there's a proper chain of evidence, then you could submit it. They have biologists, they have chemists, they have photo analysts, they have attorneys, they have police officers, they have all walks of life donate their time. So it's, they have their own television show now, MOUFON TV, where you can just watch it as if you're watching on Roku or any other type program. So they have a lot to offer, albeit there are problems within the organization that they're trying to address. And it's the hopes of me and a lot of other people that they'll go back to their original roots of being a scientific and research organization, and not expand it into these fringe ideas and fringe groups that just kind of push people away from it,
Yeah, I can sort of understand. Yeah, I can understand sort of where you're sort of like coming from, because that's very good, and how you explained it, a core sort of thing. I mean, and usually when groups do usually tend to have schisms and stuff is when you introduce these sort of fringe and elements. So it's good to hear that MOUFON are trying to get on top of it, and and as you say, sort of take it back to basics.
Right. I would imagine that the reason for the original expansion with these fringe groups was because, like anything else, they wanted to generate a little more money. They wanted to generate a little more interest. But what happens is if you do that, well, then people that are interested on a purely a UFO or alien base are going to see that, and they're going to be pushed away by that. And you were seeing a little bit of that at the conferences, at the symposiums, where people would, they would get these secret space program groups, and where they claim that they are fighting battles around Mars for 25 years. Souls are taken out of their bodies and put in, and then they're transported in time, and it's just like these wild, claims without any ounce of proof or substantiation. And then the younger people will come out and they'll say, what's going on? I mean, this is crazy stuff. So, at some point you have to reevaluate what you're doing and go back to your base. There's a few really good people that they there was some trouble with the board of directors, and so they changed that recently within the last year. But they got some of the people that were there prior, and they're older, and they came out of retirement, so to speak, to take it back over. And you're recirculating ideas from the past. And there are some wonderful people that can run this organization. I mean, and I hopefully somewhere down the line they'll give them the opportunity to do it, because I think if they did, it would be much better for everybody as a whole. So.
Okay. Do the MOUFON sort of report to the government or any, or attach to the government in any way?
So there are quite a few of us that believe that, based on the MOUFON uses what's called a case management system, and it was introduced about 3 years ago. And it's when you get a case that's given to you, and then you're able to contact the witness, and you're able to complete this report based on your whatever conclusion that you might come to. Well, these are stored in their central system, this computer. And there came a point about 2 years ago where there was a second auxiliary file attached to it, which is called a Form 30. And when people started asking what the purpose was, the purpose that they gave was if individuals wanted to search through the system, they got a abbreviated form that just showed the basics of what the report was. Well, really, people really can't go in and get that. So the general public can't. Some of the people that are MOUFON members can go in and see some of these reports, yes. But the only other reason for doing this would be to share these reports in their in totality with the federal government, military, some other organizations that can share these documents and share. That's because there's just so much information that would be there. So there's a kind of a thinking that a lot of this information that we're getting, because I mean there's over 115,000 MOUFON reports that are stored on this system, and they think maybe the government they're sharing data with the government, but that's just the theory.
I mean, the only reason I asked was because I can see that if there was any alien visitor that wanted to make first contact, they would come down, obviously, and people would report it to you guys, and you'd go off. But then the military would be all over that as well, so they wouldn't even let you get anywhere near it, would they?
No. So there was a woman that was teaching her. I on her own, I would say. I don't know if it had MOUFON's blessings, but she was teaching a course in investigation and research. And as far as I know, she has no background in any of that stuff. She wasn't a police officer. She wasn't, involved in any military organization that would have given her the experience in that. So what she would tell the students was to amass these kits, with vials and evidence bags and, this whole thing, which, I mean, people, who has the money for it? But, over time, maybe you could collect some of the things you need. You could sterilize some bottles, whatever. But so she said that it's needed in the event that you respond to a call that has a vehicle is observed landing on somebody's property, and it leaves trace evidence. So it burns the ground, it burns the trees, it leaves fluids, whatever it does. You collect this stuff, and you get it all collected up in evidence bags and everything else, and then you could send it off to the MOUFON laboratory. Well, the only thing that's wrong with that theory is if I see a craft land in my backyard, the first thing I'm doing is calling 911. That's the rational thing that people are gonna call the police, and once they get it, well then they're gonna. The military or the government will know, and they'll shut that site down faster than anybody from MOUFON can even get in there. And if you had stuff, they're not going to let you remove any of those, things that you get from there. So yeah, there's no doubt the government would know. They would know anyway, but they respond too quick for anybody to do anything, unless it was your own backyard. You know,
It's a shame they can't work with you guys, because obviously you'd have the experience for dealing with the UFOs.
Yeah, and as far as I know, nobody has that interaction. Maybe they do, some people, but it doesn't appear like anybody has the interaction with the government like that. Because to try to get information from them requires, the freedom of information, all these other things that are so yeah,
Oh, yeah, and I suppose, and the government are only going to release what they want to release anyway under a freedom of information request. I mean, surely they can't. And when you do get them, and from what I've seen, and they're all very heavily redacted anyway.
Yeah, you and I had spoken about that before. You might get a sheet of paper that's so redacted, the only thing on there is the date of the incident. Everything's blacked out. So,
as you were saying, sort of move on, getting back to basics and what you hope. And us in the paranormal field, and it must be the same in ufology, we look for patterns, and where you find patterns, you can usually sort of find, that usually does indicate there's something going on. So what is the pattern for you, or the best ingredients, and should I say, for a UFO sighting? So what's actually needed? Do you think?
Well, if you go by the numbers and from reports, a large majority of the sightings are around water. So I would say upwards of 65%, maybe a little more, is around water. Lakes, rivers, oceans, shorelines, that kind of stuff. The people that see them generally are dog walkers and smokers. You always find that people that are out at the time, people want to go out and smoke. They can't smoke inside anymore. They go outside at night, walk their dogs at night, where it's the best time to see an object in the sky, or, and those are generally the people that will report that kind of stuff. The other ones that you find, which I guess is in conjunction with the water, is our government facilities, bases, military bases, naval bases, army bases, air force bases, and industry, tech industry, that are generally contracted by the government. So if you have defense contractors that are working in these areas, you'll see sightings, a lot of sightings, in and around those adjacent areas. You might have, broken down in the United States, the states have counties, and you'll find them generally located in the counties where these industries are. And then you'll find them sometimes in the contiguous areas. You'll find a little bit, of course, because they'll fly around if that's what they're doing. And they also create a pattern, so you always want to check with neighboring states. Did anybody report a similar type object in a neighboring state? Because if these objects are able to traverse large areas very quickly, then someone else might have seen a similar thing. But that's really, that's the crux of it, is water and industry, and you see a lot of it around there.
Okay, I was trawling through the internet today, actually, and I found some reports of UFO activity around pretty much where Richard lives. And I thought, I'd read some of them out and see what you thought. These were reported by, obviously, the local press, and it was after a Freedom of Information request had gone in. So this is what they come up with. In Colchester in February, around 8:42 p.m. one evening, police were called to 3 objects seen in the sky. The caller stated he was 100% sure that they were not from an aircraft, and the lights were too bright to be from a helicopter. He also dismissed suggestions that it could have been a drone. One of the lights was described as a fireball, and no noise could be heard. Okay. It does go on to say the information provided by the police say that the lights were suspected to be either Chinese lanterns or helicopters. So what do you think about that one?
Well, so the Chinese lanterns are that's your basic fallback, you know,
Hmm.
and that's been, it's the increasing numbers of these so-called Chinese lanterns, because I mean they're easily explained away as Chinese lanterns, flares, and stuff like that. But so when it's very suspicious or an actual unknown, you'll find the simplest explanation, like a Chinese lantern. If it,
Hmm.
they might come out with the, certain aircraft, helicopters, or propeller-driven planes, but people would hear that, and a lot of times these sightings are in conjunction with complete silence. But you'll ask them, "Did you hear anything?" No. Was there any atmospheric anomalies? Did the clouds part? Was there any haze? No, there was nothing there. Just the lights in the sky. Everything was completely silent. So
Hmm.
it's easy to deduce. And
Okay. Well, there is another one in a place called Uttlesford. Again, it's in February, and I don't know whether it's the same incident, just from a different perspective. But they said also in February, police were called to a flaming ball flying through the sky at 10:20 p.m. one night. The caller insisted it was definitely not an aircraft or drone. The caller's son, who was alongside him in the car at the time, was unable to see the object because he was partially sighted. The object was described as a football, like a football with flames coming out of the back of it, and it's said to be flying low. Police records suggest it was possibly a meteor or comet. From the force received no further reports of the sign. They didn't have repeat. They didn't get any reports from sightings, and the air control at Stansted were unable to provide any answers.
right. So when it comes to meteors and things like that, we have people that will report objects that are actually they actually are meteors, but
Hmm.
but but they're just a dot of light it's like a shooting star. They try to attach a tail to it, flames to it. You're never going to see that on a meteor that enters the Earth's atmosphere. It's too high up. They're very small. They'll just burn up, and they'll just create a streak across the sky like a cloud of smoke,
Yeah.
if that. On the occasions that you might get an explode, like there has been in the past decade, some that have entered the atmosphere and actually exploded. But the only time that they realized that the object was there is when they saw it at the last second, and then witnessed the explosion.
Mm.
The some of these objects that so you don't get a lot that will say that there's actually flames being emitted from the object. Most of them are changing colors. So people will say, "I saw an orb or a sphere or a cigar-shaped object," and it was changing colors as it was moving. It
Yeah.
stopped changing colors and stood still, and then it changed colors again. So a lot of people, what they believe is that the changing of colors, the propulsion, is the effect of the propulsion system on the object, and maybe in the description that a witness gives, they describe it as a flame or as
Mm.
something else. You know what I mean? But the only real thing that we know of that creates a flame is a rocket. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, right,
And
right.
I would have thought that if this thing is the size of a flaming football, then if it hit the ground, it would create a crater
Yes,
because of the
right,
sheer force of the gravity as it
right,
hit.
right. And any object that's going to hit at the speeds that they're claiming that these objects are flying at is going to leave some kind of an impact crater,
Yeah.
and whatever else it's going to do in the meantime.
Yeah.
So,
So is that something then that you would look at this
so,
this particular case?
so what? If I can give you an example that relates to that, about a month ago, I got a report from this young fella. He lives up where I live is in the portion of the county where it's farmland. He lives about, I guess, about 18 miles east of me as you go through a national and state forest, the Sumter National Forest, going down into Georgia. So you have to go over, they call them mountains, but they're actually hills. They're not high enough to be mountains. And he said he was coming home from work, which it was dark. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and he saw this object sitting above the tree line. It was circular. He couldn't really make the edges out, but he saw it was circular, I guess. And it had a red light to the one side, for what he was looking at, to the left side, which would have been to the west. And then a blue band or stripe around the rear of the object to the east of it. He assumed that was the rear of the vehicle. He said that it was sitting motionless above the treetop, but it was bright enough where it kind of shone above the tree line. And then as he was watching it, he pulled over to the side of the road, and the blue stripe inverted to the bottom of the craft. And he said it just shot out of sight really quick, And in that particular area where he is, it's interesting because the military runs helicopters and certain light aircraft. It's some kind of a corridor that they use. And I'm not quite sure what the reason is, but so he had found out from his wife later in the day when he was speaking to her about it. She had told him that there were several aircraft, several helicopters in that area around 4 in the afternoon. So say 7 hours earlier. But he had, once this craft took off, he went home, and it was about another mile or two up the road, and he looked back to see if he could see that object, and what he saw were, I think, either 12 or 13 objects. Half of them were basically red, and the other half were white, and they were kind of floating in the air above the Sumter National Forest, which is like a mountain, like I said. I mean, they call it a mountain. And he said it was so bright that it lit the area up. So I was going to take a ride over to where he lives, but he said that they didn't leave, and there was no anomalies. There was nothing done there was no environmental impact. There was nothing else there. So, so it really just came down to a discussion. He made a drawing for me, and he submitted it to me, and but it's very interesting, and when, you're talking about somebody that sees this, he wanted to remain anonymous. He said, I don't want anybody. I just want to tell you about what I saw. I don't know what it was, but this is it. Can I remain anonymous? Yeah, absolutely. So on a scale, you kind of, here's a guy that just wants to tell you what happened, doesn't want anything from it. So it adds weight to it.
So as for you being a MUFON investigator, do you have special access to things like websites that you can actually trace the plane paths, flight paths on certain days and things like that, or even satellite links when they fly over?
Yeah, so there's the one satellite. I'd have to look up the website, but so there's a website that you can go on to even find out from where you live, where you could see the Starlink, the Elon Musk. Right.
Yeah.
You put in your longitude, latitude, or your zip code or whatever, and it'll tell you, on Thursday at 10:32 p.m. to the east at whatever degrees in the sky, you'll see these objects traverse. And and then you can contact, I think, the websites with the local airports. You can find out that. So what MUFON does is when they get a verified, you have to classify the report as unknown other. There's certain classifications. If it's unknown other, which means that, hey, listen, I went through this report, I looked at it, I spoke to the witnesses, and I believe that it's a true UAV, which means that, maybe, there's an answer to it. I just don't know what it is. So the person's witnessing something, saw something that's an actual unknown aerial vehicle. It could be man-made, maybe it's not. So they'll in turn verify if they want to take it to the next step. They'll contact these agencies where they can check on, like you said, airport, airlines crossings, things of that nature. As long as I can verify that on my end, that
can anyone just approach these websites and
yeah, Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I wish I had the website out in front of me.
Yeah,
There's another one.
you get sort of stuff that I can download. I used to have like Flight Tracker and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. Will have all the domestic flights, and there must be a way on these to actually show to bring up the history as well of sort of previous flights. So you probably could backdate them to a certain time.
But that's
Place.
just
Right.
commercial flights, though, isn't it? What about
Well, yes,
the
yes.
private flights and like military flights? Is there anywhere that you can go to check those as well?
Yeah, so all airports have to log in. We have, just in my vicinity, I have 3 small private airports for the counties that are here, and they have to log in their flight records also.
Okay.
And so I have very rarely come across the need to do that with the airlines and the airports. More so, I'll look at the satellite data and then there's another website called Stellarium. And Stellarium, you can go in and find out the celestial objects. So if somebody claims to see something on consecutive days or for a consecutive period, where it's not a one-off UFO site or whatever, you can go on this Stellarium and put in your location or their location, actually. And it'll tell you what celestial objects are in the sky at any given time. And then you can kind of pinpoint, maybe they're seeing, because a lot of people will go outside, they won't realize that what they're seeing are stars, especially lone stars that are very big, or lone stars that are actually part of a binary system where the smaller star might be behind it and it's hidden. So we never see it. And it creates a pull on the bigger star. And that's when it starts twinkling, and it'll actually look like it's moving. And they're relatively large because they're isolated from the other star clusters. And people will be outside, and then for some reason their attention is drawn to it, and they may have seen this star a million times since they were little, but for that brief period of time they're like, holy cow, it's a UFO. And that's what they're convinced of. Do you know what I mean? And then you have to go in and take their data, and then you look at the objects through through these different portals, and then you can come up with a pretty good conclusion that way. I had a case not too long ago, back in the fall, where this woman, it was 3 weeks, she was sending me videos and still photos, and she happened to live about 88 miles east of me. So finally I got on FaceTime with her, and I said to her, I pointed my phone, I said, is this the object that you're looking at? She said, yes. So I was like, I said, okay. And I told her it was my belief it was a star that she was looking at. And 3 weeks later, I investigated. I went out, and over a 5-day period, I calculated and wrote down its position in the night sky by degrees over and every half hour for 6 hours a night. And I furnished all my data to MUFON's head astronomer, Mark D'Antonio, and then the professor of astronomy at Clemson University, which is about 12 miles from me. I contacted him, and he said, just give me what you have. So I gave it to him. I told him, I said, it's my belief that it's Capella, the goat star that she's seeing, based on everything that I have. And, of course, that's what it turned out to be. They concurred with me, which I was glad, because I didn't want to look stupid. But she was kind of angry with me. I called her and I said, hey, listen, this is the conclusion that I have. It's you're seeing a star. I told her why. I told her what it was. And, she was kind of angry. She said, I thought MUFON was here to prove UFOs are real. I said, but it's really not the reason for MUFON is to kind of weed everything out and see what we're left with. And then you can kind of concentrate on that stuff. And she says, well, I don't think you know what you're doing, but thank you for... I was like, okay.
I must admit, again, looking at some of these reports, Starlink, that's quite a new thing in our skies, isn't it?
Yeah, well, he has over 1,000 satellites right now. And I think by the time he's finished in, I don't know how, it's a very short period of time, a couple of years. He wants 10,000 of these have you ever seen when the Starlink traverses the sky?
I have. I've seen them.
Yeah.
And in this report as well, it was in Epping Forest in April. A guy reported a convoy of lights spotted in the sky by a man and his father around 5:15 a.m. in the morning. One caller said there was 10 lights in a convoy at first, before other groups of 10 lights followed, several minutes apart.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Basically, the police turned around and said, they had radar experts looking at it, and no aircraft were picked up in the area, and there wasn't any other further reports. So they believe the sighting could have been that of Starlink satellites going past.
Right.
And I do know, even when the the Sky TV satellites, they've got some going over as well, and they're like 5 in a row, and then you get 10 minutes later another 5, and 10 minutes later, so it's that sort of thing. So
right, so they right, so when you look up, you'll see it as a central point, and then you'll just see multiple little lights just shoot out from this central point, and they come and go so quick. And MUFON had to put out a disclaimer. People were, when he first started putting these satellites up, people were, trying to report UFOs over and over. I saw these UFOs in the sky, and it described them. It was amazing. I've been waiting to see a UFO my whole life, and now I saw a whole bunch of that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So MUFON had to put a disclaimer and said, listen, if you're going to report this is what they look like. They put a video on their website, and they explained what the Starlink satellites were, what they looked like, and we're not dissuading you from reporting, but just keep in mind that this is what they look like, and there's more likely than not that when you describe something in that manner, that you're seeing the Starlink satellite system. So,
what do you know about the Sky Trial satellites? Sky Trial satellite system.
I've never heard of that before.
Okay, because there was another report. Police were informed of 30 balls of light in the sky around 9:50 one day. The lights were said to be in formation and shooting across the sky. The caller rejected suggestions that it could have been a plane. Police said a possible explanation was the lights could have been part of the Sky Trail satellite system.
Okay, so the SkyTrail system, that's one of the websites you can actually go on.
Right,
that'll tell you the positions of satellites in the sky. So maybe that's what they're referring to.
Yeah,
it probably sounds like it. Again, that probably sounds like the Elon Musk thing we did, because I went on the... there is a website you can go on, and you can sort of anticipate when they're coming over, and
right.
I saw them one night. Yeah,
right.
And like clockwork. Yeah, they come
right
up me.
Yeah.
The centre of the street I live on. Yeah, so it was quite something.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. You can also check to see when the International Space Station is above you.
Yeah.
And other objects. There are other satellites that, generally you could tell a satellite as it's coming across because it tumbles and it kind of reflects the light, like a pattern, like a blink, a little slow blink. But they're very small. But...
And I usually find with satellites, when I've observed them, they look like to vanish when they get directly above you.
Right, because they just don't keep going and going. At some point, they'll be.
Yeah, because they're obviously reflecting the sun,
right?
The sunlight. So as soon as your vision and it gets directly above, it's going to go out because you're not sort of like seeing the reflected sunlight from it anymore. Right,
exactly.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
Yeah, I must admit, is there any not paranormal? Is there any UFO reports from the ISS space station? Have they witnessed anything?
Yeah, well, there have been people that. So NASA will release that information. So you can go on NASA's website. They generally, they release what they want, but there are some reports and some videos of objects filmed from the ISS and from other spacecraft as well, that you could see, and there's something there. They don't deny that there's something being filmed. So, but whatever their conclusion is, I don't think they're really sharing it.
Have you ever looked into any of the big cases, like, for example, the Phoenix Lights?
So I know some people that witnessed the Phoenix Lights. So I was out in Phoenix a couple of years ago with a group from MOUFON, and there were a couple of people there that know a lot more about it than I'll ever know. There's one school that says that it was a triangular pattern that appeared to be a large craft.
Yeah.
But it would have to be a mile or so across. So it would have had to have been immense. And then there is another group that claims that it was a flare pattern. There's a military base in the area, and they claim that it's a flare pattern, which, yeah,
because they get shot out at a V formation, don't they?
Yeah, so flare patterns are generally, they stay in a pretty decent pattern for a while they don't fall to the ground super fast because they have a type of parachute system on them, and so they float in a nice pattern, and then they will tend to go out, pretty much at the same time, one after the other. So people will describe them as, well, the lights, must have been turned because the light went out over here or the light went out over there. My son was in the military, and so I keep in touch with some of the guys he was deployed with, and someone had given me a tape of a flare that appeared to, I don't know how to even describe it. You could see the flare, and then you could see particulate, and then it took out a artillery piece, and people were making out some outlandish claims. So I showed it to some of them. I said, hey, do you have any idea what this is? And like within 5 minutes, they're all writing me back. It's called an arty. I guess it's an artillery flare. And they said you could tell that it's an artillery flare because it's doing what it's designed to do. It identifies the artillery piece, and then when it gets close enough to it, it goes and it explodes, hopefully taking out the artillery flare. And it looks like it's did you ever see At the Day the Earth Stood Still, the remake where the big orc guy becomes those little teeny fly things? That's exactly what it looked like. And
that was actually on telly the other day.
It's actually a pretty decent remake.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah. But that's with the Phoenix Lights, you'll get people. But just like anything else, you guys know, people, once something's reported and they know they're getting some attention on it, well, that kind of grows a life of its own, and then there's all these grandiose explanations for something that probably has a very simple explanation, but because there's attention drawn, and it's people are getting something from it, who knows what it is.
I think you find, sort of certain people will guard it real precious, like it's their own sort of, it's the biggest thing. Like we have our very own, like Roswell and over here, which is the Rendlesham Forest incident,
right?
Which is now seems to have, from what it started off as quite a benign sort of sighting in some woods. You're talking like 40 years later. I mean, it's sort of morphed into this sort of huge sort of mudslinging match between everyone that's involved in it.
Right, and doesn't that take away the credibility?
Well, it does. Yeah, I mean, but we've had it investigated by one of the government guys. I think it was Nick Pope who investigated it.
Nick's. I tell you what, he's got. He doesn't have any credibility issues. He's a good guy. So.
Well, I mean, I've actually read his report on the incident, and to be honest, I could have come up with the same conclusion without even going there.
Right.
I think the two conclusions he come up with was either it actually happened, or the servicemen were lying.
You're right.
And yeah,
That's
I
the two
can.
options, right?
Yeah, exactly. I could come up with, I could say that about any case. I mean, the Phoenix Lights, for example, it either happened or everyone has claimed they see it were lying.
I think
Right.
the thing with
You
the
know,
Phoenix Lights is you've got a lot of sort of like film footage actually of it, haven't you? Or sort of like
yeah,
two or three
and
main
there's
pieces.
thousands. There was thousands of witnesses to it as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it
Yeah.
expanded that whole area of
Mm.
Arizona. There was thousands of witnesses. But then, you have people that come out now and say they witnessed, like the one guy that was involved with the Travis Walton abduction, and
Hmm.
he claims that he saw it now, and he's I mean, so sometimes more information is too much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That case was actually the one that really stuck with me and sort of fed my interest in the UFOlogy
Hmm.
side of things.
The
The one with
Travis Walton.
Travis Walton, yeah. I mean, initially I didn't know nothing about it because I was young when it happened, and it wasn't until the movie came out, Fire in the Sky, that I
Right.
actually was like, oh, that's interesting. Does that actually happen? And then I sort of, as I grew up, I sort of learned that it actually was based on a true story, and you
Right.
know, even Close Encounter of the Third Kind, that was supposed to be based on a true story as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess the thing is, that's another, with Paul Hynek, J. Allen Hynek, Paul's his son.
Mm.
He was behind the scientific portion of that movie, and you know, J. Allen Hynek is celebrated as this big MUFON, big UAP contributor, and when he was actually with Project Sign and Grudge and Project Blue Book, he was their designated debunker. What
Mm.
they basically told him was, whatever comes in, we want you to explain it away because we don't want anybody thinking they saw a UFO or flying saucer, whatever. So that's what he did. He spent a
Mm.
lot of time. He ruined a lot of careers of a lot of good Air Force and Army and Navy pilots by doing that, because when he couldn't completely conclude that it was a star, it was Venus, or it was an anomaly, he would say, well, it's pilot error, pilot fatigue, things of psychological nature. And it was many years later that he actually came out and apologized for doing that to these guys who lost their positions or retired or were forced out. So when he comes out later in life now and wants to claim that he has scientific experience, scientific knowledge on what these objects are. Well, any rational person has to take it as, with a grain of salt, so to speak. Because on one hand, is he telling you that they're fake for all these years when he's with the government and he's a paid hack? And now, many years later, he's coming out saying, well, I was only kidding and these things are real. So he did have a part in that. Supposedly the landing when the aliens come out is based on an actual event where they actually came and exited the craft. So
Hmm. I mean, we hear quite a lot about the American government and like Men in Black, and they want to keep things on the lowdown when it comes to UFOs. So, in your experience, have you ever encountered anything where the government have almost said like, "Shut up, don't say that"?
no, and I don't know anybody that has, to be honest with you. I know people that have been in MUFON for years. I know some people that have been investigating and been investigating for 30 years, and they've gone to areas where they're supposedly landing sites. They've interviewed people through the ERT, which is the Experiencer Research Team, where people claim
Yeah.
to have been abducted, and they go through the regressive hypnosis. Some people have written books. Some people have written, small articles for MUFON and everything. I've written a couple of articles for MUFON that are supposedly They're going to be published soon in a collection, an anthology type series for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know anybody that's been approached by any of these people that they claim that the government has spying on them. So I don't know.
Interesting.
There you go, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no Men in Black. Well disappointed.
Yeah, not one person I know has ever claimed Men in Black.
I was looking forward to joining.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted the flashy thing.
So the odd thing is, though, when I was doing the research with Brandon Shea with Serial Spirits, when we were doing the investigation to the paranormal portion of it with Indrid Cold and Mothman and stuff like that, you kind of saw the Men in Black issue arise, where they were in conjunction with some of these sightings. So, who knows? Who knows what it is? Are they a part of these Ingrid Cold sightings, these Mothman, some of these paranormal issues? Are they also paranormal, or are they parts of the CIA or intelligent community of the government, like some people say? I don't know, but that's when the reports come in.
Maybe it's a case of they're not actually, if Men in Black do sort of exist, they're not there to squash any reports of UFO sightings, because the government can do that quite easily just by saying, no, they don't exist. But maybe it's a case of policing aliens on the planet.
That's what I think. That's my belief as I look more and more into this stuff. And I've talked to Richard before about this, and so I think there a good portion of these sightings are governmental, military, especially between Britain and the United States. Maybe you get a couple of France and a couple other smaller countries, and then you would get maybe Russia and China on the other hand, but nothing where they're going to want to reveal any of this stuff, because why would they? They're not going to reveal it to the government. And, Boris Johnson's not going to know, just like Donald Trump wasn't going to know, and because they're not going to take the chance. Some of the other stuff, on the other hand, in order to traverse a galaxy even, you would need mechanisms that we can't even understand. If they can fold space and time, fine. But what would be easier would be to actually think of it in a multiverse theory, where the vibration of each molecule dictates that universe, that the structure of that universe. So if there's 5 multiverses, maybe the species in multiverse number 5 can vibrate the frequencies of the molecules in universe number 2 and could pop a hole big enough to get through, and then they can come back and forth. You still have to identify where life was, but I think that if you can do that, well, even on Earth, we're starting to come up with technology that can look at stars and planets and see if there are gases in the atmospheres that would signify some type of life being there. So,
do you think then that there are some national secrets or even international secrets that the world leaders, like the president and the Queen and kings and stuff, don't know or not been told to help cover that lie?
I would think that's the rule of thumb. I really would, because us three can agree that governments can't be trusted, and the government leaders can't be trusted. I don't even think some of these government leaders get in there and they're running the whole show themselves. Most of them are just appendages of the people that are there pulling the strings. So say there's the United States and Britain have a technology where there's aircraft that can, circumvent the planet in an hour, like there are some people theorize. Would we want China and Russia to know? If we had capabilities that could make space a platform for military use, would we want a belligerent or a prospective belligerent to know? There's no way. So you get in.
So I think what I'm sort of getting at is that maybe the president, for example, I use America as an example. There are in his government people that do know about it, but won't tell the president, because when anything like this does kick off, the president's the go-to man, and if he's like, nope, I'm literally told all the same stuff you are, I don't believe in it, there is no aliens. So for him, he's actually telling the truth because that's what he knows.
That's what he believes, right?
Yeah.
And so the less information they have, the less chance of anything So if they believe that that aliens pose a threat to this planet or to a country, well, they're not going to tell the leader who, theoretically, if he's transparent, like all leaders should be, but aren't, he could come out and divulge this to an unsuspecting mass of people. And, so you don't know what that would do to society, to religion, to fundamental workings of a government. Who knows? But I think in the United States, for sure, there were a couple of presidents that knew and a couple that tried to know. I would think, looking back, that Eisenhower, if there was any evidence coming out of World War II, because they focused so heavily on the Foo Fighter issue, he knew something. I believe that if he knew, and then Harry Truman may have. But then I don't think anybody really got involved until JFK. And there are theories that he was killed because he was entering into a conversation with Brezhnev about finding out where these things are and what they're doing, and there was an agreement. And then after that, when you come up to Ronald Reagan, but his vice president was George W. Bush, who was the head of the CIA for the United States for many years. So if anybody's going to know anything about UFOs, aliens, and stuff like that, it's going to be the CIA. So I believe George W. Bush knew, and then of course Reagan knew, and then George W. Bush's son, he knew, and I think that's where it ends. I think that's where any talk about it ends.
The reason I thought of that is because, again, I know it's a film, but in Independence Day, you had when they're in the scene when they're on the aircraft, Air Force One, and the hero's dad turned around to the president and said, "You knew that there was aliens. You had the Roswell spaceship in Area 51."
Right.
And the president turned around and said, "Look, there is no Area 51. There's no aliens. I don't know where you get that from. It's a load of old rubbish." But then that's all the information that he was given until that one person on his security staff turned around and was like, "Well, actually, that's not quite true." And even the president turned around and was like, "Okay, what bit?"
Right. And I think that's probably a good, a good guide to what some of these leaders are told. I don't think they're really told much of anything at all, because I think they go into it knowing they're not going to be told. I think that's what it is. They just said, don't ask.
Yeah.
And if you're asked, you don't know anything, because it makes it safer for everybody.
So do you think then, with all these films about aliens coming out, do you think there is some sort of element of truth when they're dripping information to us in preparation for at least first contact at some stage?
So a couple of years ago at one of the symposiums, there was one of the men that worked on Close Encounters. He was a director. He came and he did he did a discussion on it. It was very interesting, and he gave a timeline from going back to. But you got to remember that. So Roswell really wasn't an issue until the 50s. It wasn't like this plane. It wasn't like this object crashed in 1947 and it was on the front pages of papers for the next 10 years. It was squashed in a couple of days, and nobody really raised any issues of it until much later. But taking that into account, he did a timeline leading up from 1949, 1950, kind of starting with some of the science fiction movies with aliens, The Thing from Another Planet, which is based on a book from 1939 called Who Goes There? Yeah. And then you work your way forward on, Mars Attacks, and you work up into the 70s with Close Encounters, and then up with Alien in the late 70s into the 80s. And So there's a lot of people that do believe that this is a soft approach to what is out there, and some of these, so Steven Spielberg and some of these other writers, directors have a little bit of knowledge as to what actually exists, and they're incorporating this into their products. I mean, it's not out of the question, really. So,
okay, Richard, did you have a question?
No, I didn't know. I was just listening. I mean, as regards sort of presidents and who knows, I mean, it is all does seem to be very much on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah, I mean, that's so. Even if you take some of the recent, well, I say recent, from Ronald Reagan, where he introduced Star Wars, which, you know, people joked about and laughed about. All it was a strategic defense system where it was a system of satellites that could identify incoming missiles and shoot them down. But the way he was speaking of it was basing it on alien tech and other things like that. And an alien invasion, even just recently with Bill Clinton saying that he was going to look into it, and then he, you know, it was never asked again. Some people have run on the idea of disclosure, but they never really speak of it. And just in the last presidency, Donald Trump was asked several times about UFOs. The first time they asked him his opinion, he said, well, I don't really believe in any of it, but if somebody tells me different, I'll let you know, which he probably would have if he was ever told, you know. But then someone had asked him later on about it, and he said, I'll look into it. And people got kind of angry at the suggestion that he was going to look into anything related to off-world stuff. And I haven't heard anything about it since. So, okay.
Okay, so what we'll do, we'll take a quick break here. So we will leave you with this thought, and we'll be right back just after this.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PAUK Radio Network. Broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
And welcome back to the second half of the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the PAUK Radio Network. Before the break, we was talking to Christy Marais in regarding to aliens and UFOs. So we're going to carry on that chat now. So, Richard, fire away questions.
It's sort of like we've sort of like spoken about, sort of like, you know, sort of like the evidence that is out there and sort of what Chris actually looks into. I mean, and what I sort of want to try and get into now is perhaps a bit more of the theory behind. I mean, with MOUFON, is there a consensus? What is their sort of official standpoint on this phenomena that's going on?
Well, I think it's like anything else. There are different people who believe the origins are, you know, there are various origins of these craft. Some people believe that they're strictly, you know, alien craft from planets throughout the universe that come by and periodically check us out like we're, you know, in a petri dish, you know, and some think that we've had contact with alien species for thousands of years and they're just coming back to look at us. Others think that they're sharing technology with us. I don't quite understand, because, I mean, what would we have in any area of technology that we're able to share with beings that could traverse the galaxy? And then others, you know, think that a lot of it is secret governmental tech, especially the triangles, which, you know, pretty much everybody agrees they're governmental. You know, even you guys have them over in the UK, especially down where you guys are. There's a lot of sightings of triangles, and so there's the general understanding that there are naval or Air Force craft, like airborne battleships or aircraft carriers and stuff like that. So it can vary.
I think the introduction of, I think this was all born out sort of back in the 80s with the introduction of the 2 stealth aircraft in the United States. You had the fighter and the bomber.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, sort of like looking at those, I mean, it seems to be sort of like perhaps the triangle shape, it seems to be quite an octagon shape for stealth.
Right, so that's the only real UFO that I can say that I honestly witnessed myself. Yeah, I've seen other things. I don't know what they were, but this, I can, and I still have some of the fellows that I was with when I saw it. Every once in a while we'll just, do you remember that thing we saw? But it was absolutely huge. I mean, it was. I was just getting into the police academy, and I was out late one night with a couple of my friends. We met up with a group of other friends. It was about 2:00 in the morning, and we were on the Hudson River. It was an old abandoned textile mill, and we were just hanging out. We had our cars, playing music, just talking, and someone said, what is that thing coming down above the train tracks? So the Hudson line goes from upstate towards Westchester and Dutchess County, and it comes into New York City. And as it came closer, we could see that it was just the shape of the lights were shaped like a triangle, and it was moving real slow. And as it came towards us, it was absolutely huge. It had to have been 400 or 500 feet on each edge, and it was so close, almost like you felt like you could reach out and touch it because it was so huge. And we ran from this area where we call them the sand piles, where the state piles up sand to use in the wintertime. There are these huge piles. We were, about maybe 75 yards away, and we started running towards the train tracks. And as we're doing it, it just came up above us, and it was only moving maybe 25 miles an hour directly above the tracks down. It was just absolutely huge, and it was absolutely surreal to see this object. And none of us were equating it with UFOs at the time. It was more, we were, 23, 24 years old, and what the hell is that, And we just kind of watched it. Nobody had cell phones back then. Nobody carried cameras with them back then. And it floated until we could see it pass around this bend of the Hudson going into Yonkers, into New York City, and it was gone. And but it was one of many sightings of the triangles up through Westchester County, up through the reservoir systems and everything, But
yeah, because you mentioned a very interesting part that it's the Hudson Valley, because that is quite a hot spot, I believe.
Yeah, right. The Hudson Valley, the Palisades, where New Jersey and New York are, just separated by the river there. There's a woman, her name is Linda Zimmerman. She's from that area. She's done quite a bit of research into the study of it. I spoke to her briefly not too long ago about it when I was looking into the corporations in the area. Honeywell, those are two of the names, and Dow Chemicals that always pop up when you have multiple sightings in areas, especially sightings of triangle-shaped objects, orbs and spheres, which technically are the same. People just describe them different. And then you see these companies, these large corporations, which happen to be defense contractors or government contractors in the area. But yeah, I mean, so the claim is that those triangle craft are almost like akin to an aircraft carrier, and they're carrying smaller aircraft within inside of them, and they're taking them to different places, whatever the purpose is. Nobody's ever really reached or touched upon that, but
where do you think these craft are coming from? If they are alien, do you think they're already here, or Do you think they're using these craft to travel thousands of light years or across dimensions? Or what are your personal views on that?
So I don't think that they can. I think if you're gonna view them as off-world, the limitation of speed is the speed of light as we know it. The only way for them, even from the nearest star, which is 4 light years away, would take 4 years, 8 years back and forth to where they're from. Mm-hmm. So unless they have the technology to bend space and time, to pop a hole through space and time, first they'd have to know we were here. So if they're just randomly going to poke a hole in space and time and they're going to look for things in the area, maybe they could do that until they find a civilization or a planet with a civilization on it. Maybe they've done that a couple of thousands of years ago. We've only become industrialized over the last couple of hundred years, so we wouldn't have really left that big of a marker on this planet. If they can't do that, then I would think that they would be interdimensional. I guess you'd call it interdimensional. My words I would use would be multiverse. So there's the theory that there could be hundreds of thousands of universes overlapping because of the vibration frequency of each individual molecule. And somewhere, somehow, some civilization has created a way to adjust the vibration in those molecules to open a portal into another universe. And then they could seek out. So then even if you can only travel the speed of light, you could still go and do a little bit of reconnaissance, but or the other thing is if you believe that we're approaching on self-replicating AI. So the kind of logical thing to think would be that thousands of years ago, some civilizations out there that could be hundreds of thousands of years older than us because the universe is so old, that they created some type of self-replicating AI that they sent out to different areas, and they would land on a planet or a moon, and they'd replicate themselves and then go off into their own searching of the galaxy, but it's been going on for thousands of years, and they've finally reached certain destinations that are of interest to them. So maybe they have been here for a while, but does it mean that it's flesh and blood creatures, or maybe more of like an AI robotics that kind of have now almost become a living organism of its own? So I think there's a couple of different things that you could look at and see what it is personally that you might agree with, as far as the theories go, because there's a bunch out there that all of them make a little bit of sense.
So with obviously the interdimensional other Earths theory out there, how do you think these other Earths get created? Do you think it's almost like every decision we make, branches off into another dimension? So each choice pans out. You know what I mean?
So the way I look at it is that it's just another universe. It's distinct and it's separate from us. Okay. It's just another universe. It doesn't have so. I think, remember that movie that about, I think it was I don't remember the name of it now, but it was based on the fact that the Earth there was another Earth on the opposite side of the sun, but we could never see it. It was a film from like the 60s, I believe.
Yes, I know the one.
You know what I'm talking about? And so they never knew it was there because it's always on the opposite side of the sun. But when space exploration allowed us to get around the sun, it was discovered. And when it was discovered, it was found to be Earth, but the opposite of Earth. So everything was opposite. So if you were nice, you were mean. If you were left-handed, you were right. So
on an episode, some of the Star Trek episodes sort of work on that principle with the mirror universe, and they've crossed over. So in our universe, obviously Starfleet represented exploration, peace, and all that. And in the mirror universe, it was a complete opposite. It was more like, that they would go out and wage war on planets and take it for their own and run it as an empire type.
Right.
So I get I get that concept. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you believe that the multiverse theory, that it's just a different universe. They don't, I mean, and it's just like looking at a wood table. It looks solid to us, but if you get down on the molecular level, it's full of space.
Yeah, it's full of holes.
Yeah, and I mean, so what if these molecules can vibrate at a different frequency, and there's 1,000 tables sitting there in theory, but we just don't know it because we don't see it that way. But some interdimensional being has the technology to change the frequency, to alter it so that he can step from one universe into another.
Yeah.
And then come back. I think that would be more likely than to think that that someone could traverse the galaxies and actually do exploration. They'd have to live thousands and thousands of years just to get from one place to another. So unless they could bend space and time like that, they could distort space and time and poke the hole through and come out on the opposite side. And so I guess it's pick the theory of your choice. Right?
Exactly, because time is a man-made concept, and it involves the Earth rotating around the sun. It does get a lot more complicated when it's in space.
Right. It's absolutely based on our relation to our own sun. So, but the speed of light is the only constant that we can.
Well, that's always been my argument, for all the nuts and bolts sort of a UFO theory, that they, as much as sort of I'd like to sort of try and think that something could, it is the physics just doesn't add up, and I'm sure on other planets they would have the same sort of physics we have got here. I don't think that would change much, if at all.
No, right. I think the physics
in this universe, anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree, and I think that's the problem with some of the theories.
Yeah,
it gets stuck on that ability to move, where it makes sense relative to even age.
Yeah.
So unless things live on our concept of time for 100,000 years, But otherwise, most of what I think that we see is man-made stuff. I think a majority of it's man-made. And we see it by accident. And some of the other stuff is maybe interdimensional in the universe. And sometimes they let us see them for whatever reason, or they're seen when they're doing something, and we just happen to see them at that period of time. I really don't know, but that's my opinion anyway.
I mean, why do you think that if they are interdimensional beings and aliens and stuff, why do you think they're visiting us? Are they just watching or preparing us for something? I don't know.
Yeah, so I think it's just it's the nature of higher sentient beings, just the curiosity to see, just to explore and to learn. And I've also talked to some other people where they believe that there is a consortium of sorts, and it involves several planets from within this galaxy that have the ability to travel through these portals, and that they want although eventually they want the Earth to join this consortium, that right now society won't allow us to. We haven't evolved in a spiritual and societal way that would let us join them, and that they're here in these places like Area 51 and some of these other hot spots that are, they're trading certain technology, but they won't trade propulsion system tech, and they won't trade weapon systems tech. So they don't want us to get weapons, and they don't want us to be able to get off this planet with weapons that'll put anything else in peril. But so some people believe that it's the DNA that humans have, that we're a very complex life form, and that there are a lot of other beings throughout the universe that can use what we have in our DNA to their benefits, whether it's to enhance their capabilities, whether it's to create other types of life form. It's a virtual, smorgasbord of DNA, and that's why they come. So that's their trade-off. They will help you with certain things. But then, when you really take a step back and look at it, I wrote a blog on when the virus hit, and people had been talking prior to that about medicinal tech and, all these things that the aliens could give, limb regeneration and all these other types of fancy, medicine tech. And so I said, well, where are they now? If this was the case, then why wouldn't they just come down here as if they're benevolent and give us the, the antidote to this virus? But
yeah, that'd be interfering in a pre-warp civilization.
well, that's what they would say, right?
Yeah, they'll just
so there
have
isn't
to
always
say
an
that.
answer to it.
Yeah, I'm a Star Trek fan, so that's like number one wall,
Oh, we got it in there.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on sort of like, sort of moving, sort of like the fringe of the sort of like the UFO world? I mean, and have you ever been involved in abduction cases?
So I'm not really on board with the whole abduction thing. I kind of steer clear, and then when people bring it up, I try to steer clear of it because it just creates arguments with people. I just don't believe. I think when it comes to abductions, I think there are underlying issues that people have. I don't see any reason for, if these beings can get to our planet from wherever they are with the technology that they have. If they needed a person, well, then they needed a person. If they needed a cow, they needed a cow. If they needed a dog, but then they have it. And if they have the technology, they don't need to keep coming back for more and more. They would be able to get their DNA. They would be able to get. I could see if they wanted to come down and just study society, study human nature, study human beings, study our interaction with the environment, with other creatures. Well, that's fine. But to say that we're being abducted because they're studying us for our physiological, whichever's intrinsic to us, I don't understand that purpose if they're that far advanced from us. Just a DNA sample would do, and I've read a lot of stories about people that have been abducted. Now, to come in contact, when you come in contact with off-world beings, that's one thing. I come in contact with this being, it's come back, we've interacted, that's fine. But to say then that there's these mass abductions, there would be really no logical purpose for that. They try to equate it with missing people in different areas of the country, of different countries of the world. And so they're missing people. But now you're making the leap from, they went out into a national forest and got lost because they didn't know what they were doing, or they got hurt or injured or whatever, and they got to be abducted by aliens. So you're making this fantastic leap. I've talked to some people where you could tell there are underlying. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a counselor. I don't know anything about that. But I interacted as a police officer with a lot of different people, and there are underlying signs. There are signs that there's underlying issues going on where people are claiming these fantastic things, and on the other hand, nobody provides proof. At least with UFO sightings and stuff, there are people out there that have videoed objects. They've filmed them. They've taken still photos of them. There have been multiple witnesses to the same thing, like you said, with the Phoenix Lights. But with these abduction issues, we've never seen any physical evidence of abductions outside of what people might perpetrate on themselves. Pinholes to make marks where they claim that they were, they were, injected with some kind of element, or, so these I was at a conference a couple of years ago, about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where it was a panel discussion that I was sitting in on just to listen to what was going on. And there was a young girl that was sitting not too far from me, and she was probably in her early 20s, and she was sitting there all quiet at one point. And then you could ask the panel some questions, and it was on, I forget if it was on cattle mutilation. It was on something with cattle mutilations and stuff of that nature. And she raised her hand, and what's your question? She said, well, she goes, I just want to let everybody know I met my 13th octopus hybrid baby the other day. And, like, you could hear a pin drop. And so the guy was like, well, what's the question? She's like, well, I just want to let people know how scary it is. And like that like I said, the girl had to be about 21 years old. And she went off for about 5 minutes how over the course of her young life, she's been abducted by a group of off-worlders who take her eggs from her ovary and will hybridize them with some of these different reptilian and squid type beings, and then they bring her back later to see what they look like because they want her to interact with them so that they can learn more about humanity. And so a person that hears that, a rational person or just a normal thinking person hears that, and it's like, what the heck is going on? It's like, do you know what I mean? And so that's kind of the stuff that you get sometimes. There's just stories like that where there has to be underlying issues. Either there's underlying medical issues, or the person just is there's a lot of narcissists who, once they get some attention to a story they tell, will just expand on it and keep going and going because they like the attention. And I just don't buy the abduction theory. I just can't get past that point.
I've heard different theories about different parts of our evolutionary tract from Homo sapiens right through to present day. And in the evolution of the human being, we did actually make a massive evolutionary jump in intelligence. Now, could it not be possible that an alien would interfere with our natural progression to make us have that evolutionary jump, and every so often come back and check on us to make sure that whatever they gave us is still working, or and we're going on the path that they set for us?
I mean, anything is possible, but even if you take basic anthropology courses at college or university, you can go back to where there is a period of time where there were multiple human-like hominid or hominin species on this planet. Homo sapiens sapien is just the last one to exist. And at one point, Neanderthal, Homo sapiens, Cro-Magnons, there were other Denisovans in the in which is the part of Asia. All were surviving at the same. All were living at the same time. If you go even further back into the fossil records, there were hundreds of different types of hominid species that lived at the same time. So whether one just was a little smarter, was a little more physical, adapted to the area of its region where it was living, and it was able to survive, while the other ones, went into extinction. There's proof now through genetics where Neanderthals didn't just disappear. They weren't hunted out of existence. They just intermarried. There was probably a lower population of them. Homo sapiens were a larger population. They met. They had offspring together and just became one species. Is there a chance that some alien species came down and introduced DNA? But you have to also remember that this fauna and flora on Earth can't even Like, we can't mate with dogs, gorillas, cats. They can't mate with each other. And we're from the same planet. So what are the chances that some species from 100,000 light years away from a planet where we don't even, so we're carbon-based. Maybe they're magnesium-based or copper-based. So what are the chances that they're going to be able to introduce their DNA and incorporate it into us, or to make us different, or even know how to manipulate our DNA to enhance our features? I don't know. I'm not saying it's impossible.
That is a plausible explanation. And, even just the mere fact that, okay, yeah, we are carbon-based life forms, but we do actually have other chemicals and other elements in our body. I mean, we've got iron, and obviously it works well with the carbon. And don't we have like something in gold as well?
Right. I think there's a whole bunch of different elements that we have to have.
So it could be possible that they were injected by another alien that could be iron-based life form or a gold-based life form.
Anything's possible. I'm never going to say never to anything.
It's interesting, definitely.
Yeah, I'm not going to, because I don't know, so I'm not going to say that I do, and I'll keep my mind open. Sure, just like they're saying now that these cephalopods are foreign to this planet, that they were somehow brought in during the early bombardment period on some comet or asteroid, and from a chunk of another planet from some solar system way out there, and landed in our oceans and became squid and octopus and the copper-based blood. And I mean, so, yes, there are different things. So anything's possible. But
yeah, well, I'd say Richard will tell you, I've always had my suspicions about octopus.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Wait, isn't that what the Kraken is?
Possibly.
Well, yeah, pretty much, yeah. Giant squid type thing, yeah.
Yeah, with the big beaks for mouths. Crazy stuff.
Absolutely, and apparently they don't share any DNA with any other creature on Earth.
Not like, right. Not that would make it so.
They're totally weird. They're amazing creatures.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a large consensus that says they might not be from this planet.
There is one sort of form of peculiarity that's actually happened and is recorded. I'm just wondering what your views would be on cattle mutilation.
I don't know. So I kind of fall back into the same position with alien abductions.
Yeah.
And so I live in I come from right outside of New York City. I didn't see my first real bovine, equine. I didn't see, of course, cats and dogs, maybe a raccoon or a squirrel, but I didn't touch my first horse. I have to say I was scared of horses. I didn't touch my first horse until my neighbor got her horse had ponies 2 years ago, and then I went up and finally had the whats to go up and touch it. I was definitely afraid of horses. The cows are okay. I come from the dairy area now. I've asked farmers. They think I'm absolutely nuts. I say, have you ever found any of your animals dead on your pastures? Well, they die, but they'll be sick and they die, or they die. They try to get them in before they have their calves.
Yeah.
And stuff, but sometimes they don't, sometimes they'll die. And so I fall back to the same thing, when you have like that Linda Moulton Howe who talks about cattle, but then what they do in these shows and these programs that she speaks on, they don't give the converse. So they don't allow the rebuttal to come in from people that do know what animals of that type look like when they die. So when you talk to these farmers and you say, hey, what does the cow look like when it's dead for a few days? Ah, man, the eyeballs are gone, the tongue is gone, all that soft tissue is gone. The birds, we have huge turkey vultures here that are just 30, 40 pounds. They eat the anus out of the animal. I found a rabbit in the road in front of my house. He must have got hit 2 nights ago. I found him yesterday morning. So quickly that he was hit, he was laying in the road, but the turkey vultures had come down and already rooted out his anal area. So there was a huge hole there, got its liver and its heart out from its chest by picking at it. So that's kind of the norm for what you would see. She says it's aliens coming down and taking the DNA or but for what reason? If these beings can traverse the galaxy, find us, get here, study us, why would they keep needing to mutilate animals to get whatever DNA, whatever information they need from that animal, when they should be able to? Okay, maybe they get it once and they lose it on the way home. I don't know, and they have to come back and get it some more. but hundreds and hundreds, I just don't buy it. You know what I mean? I think if even us, if we need a DNA sample or sample some other things, we usually can just generally get it from one time, and we're relatively, backwards technologically yet. So
yeah, because how far advanced would you say the military is? 50 years? You reckon?
Yeah, I spoke to a fella named Jim Goodall, who's been involved. He was a Vietnam vet. He's been involved in avionics for his whole career. He knows Bob Lazar. He knows Don Schmidt. He knows all. Very, very nice guy to talk to. Very freely talk. I think he's getting older now, and he talks more freely. And he said that his opinion, the tech that we have is 100 years behind what the government has.
Really?
Yeah. So he when Brendan and I were doing the research and we're coming up with these corporate names in association with these clumps of sightings throughout these states, and then we associated them with these tech companies, and then you find out that they're government. The government uses these tech companies under these black ops programs and the black money and everything. He was telling us that 100 years tech, that what they do essentially is the government will need something, and it goes to Honeywell or Dow or Union Carbide or BAS or whatever and says, can you develop this for us? This is what we need. And they funnel them in billions of dollars. They produce this object or this tech for the government. And the government says, fine, in 25, 30 years, we'll give you the patent that you created for us. But until then, we own it. And we're going to use this tech for ourselves. And in 30, 40 years, we'll give it back to you and then, have at it, make all the money in the world that you want. And that's generally what they do with avionics, or what they call avionics, but aviation tech, propulsion tech, weapons tech. And he was telling me, I had spoken to him one night, and he said that, even with cell phones, the cell phones that we all carry today, which is essentially a handheld computer, he said that the government had these in the early 70s. He said, it's just, he said, so if you can imagine having these cell phones that we're carrying today, these iPhones, we're carrying them today. They had them, 45, 50 years ago. Can you imagine what they have now? But you won't see it for another several decades. So, and when you think about it, when you sit back and think about it, how true it becomes when you envision it that way. You know what I mean? It's very interesting, though.
Yeah, definitely mind blowing, isn't it, when you think about it?
Yeah, and like I said to you guys before, I mean, starting with the Lend-Lease program back in the late 1930s between the United States and England, Great Britain. Most people don't even know history anymore, but those that do think that the Lend-Lease was us, because we didn't want to get into the war. We just gave out our tanks and our planes and our guns, and we just lent them out. And then we were allowed to lease certain bases for numbers of years. And that's not really what it was. What it was that Great Britain had the tech at the time was becoming so advanced, but they didn't have the manufacturing base and capabilities to produce it all. So what they did was they got in with the United States and said, hey, listen, can we send you these patents and you guys build it for us? And then they came into agreements throughout the world with sharing of naval bases and army bases. That's why you see that we're in each other's countries. We're in England. You guys are here in the States and sharing. My son did one of his combat jumps with Canada and Great Britain on a training because they're enmeshed in everybody. And it goes back to the Lend-Lease program where, creating all that tech. So you have to believe that the UK and America are still in that kind of marriage with technology and stuff.
Especially in my part of the country I live in, just up the road, you have got sort of like, there's still two. A lot have closed down now, like Woodbridge and Bentwaters are actually closed, but you've still got Lakenheath and Mildenhall, which are big US air bases, and they are big places. They really are.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't think in this day and age, I think that you're, at least in our lifetime, you're going to see the continuous relationship between our two countries. I mean, first of all, we speak the same language for now, anyway.
Well, but it does help, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it does.
And it's we by strength and unity between countries, we control a great portion of the globe to protect each other, and I think you'll always see that. There's a lot of people that would like to see that end, but I don't think it's going to ever end.
But you were talking about this sort of link and stuff, and your sort of like research has actually brought you over to the UK in the past, isn't it?
As far as my research is done, yeah. As a matter of fact, I just picked up a couple of new books. One is just a bunch of articles, and it's kind of slow to read. But I've been looking a little bit more at the Channel Islands, especially the Isle of Wight. Yeah. And what I'm finding is there's a connection. I know that they're geographically right next to each other, but I'm seeing that there's like a connection, an overlap between the Isle of Wight and Portsmouth, that area of Portsmouth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and I see that there's a naval base there. There's also a big aviation facility, an aviation tech facility in that area also.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense for the sightings that are being seen there. The amount of sightings, anyway, that are being seen is a tremendous amount for that small area.
Well, as you say, and as you sort of said at the start of the show, it's got all the elements there, isn't it? Sort of naval base, water, and the Portsmouth naval base is the, I think that's the second biggest UK Royal Navy base in the country, anyway. Yeah. So that would sort of, tick a few boxes there.
Yeah, it definitely would make sense. UFOs like water, so I don't think they're using them for people. Well, people will say, well, maybe they need the water. Well, they don't really need the water, because if their craft can go out into even our solar system, well, they can get water from asteroids and comets. They can mine whatever they need for precious metals and all that. I think it's just that they hide with water, that it's easier to hide with water.
Yeah.
And then people live around water. So the majority of the population in this world lives around water supply. So that's, if there's activity in and around that area, it's because more people live there and more people are seeing some of these things. And I think some of them are hiding in deep water. I always ask when I take a report, what's the nearest water body? How deep is it? And, if it's anything more than 150 feet, you get statistically quite a few sightings. If it has something to do with the depth, it has something to do, maybe they can get in there, and it's easier than they can hide. I mean, they don't need a secret place to go to. They can just go under the water and nobody will see them. So.
Yeah. Be none the wiser.
No, right. Nobody. There's been sightings in water for hundreds of years. I mean, even in Christopher Columbus's log when he was coming down to the West Indies, he has in his ship's log that they saw lights that looked like lanterns underneath the boat that he was in, following them. So
yeah, I remember reading that. Well, reading the report. Yeah. Oh, again, that's interesting. Again, going into the whole ancient alien theory, then, doesn't it?
Yeah. That's I've heard those guys talk, and I mean, I don't know.
Well, everything's to do with ancient aliens. You know,
Yeah.
You've got to credit the human race with being at least intelligent and being able to do something for itself, as opposed to having intervention.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think, it's still possible, because if you think about it, again, with time being a man-made concept, our time on this planet is governed by, cycles of the Earth and the Sun. Yeah. Maybe where they come from, it's the same, but to them, 1 year constitutes like 365 years of our year. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe their systems are built to last that longer because of the time it takes the planet to go around. So they could have visited in the year dot and still be alive now,
It could be. Who knows? But the only thing about ancient aliens is they never have anybody that comes on to give the opposite view or to debunk what they're saying or to give evidence to the contrary,
The History Channel know when they're onto a good thing.
We just need an alien to come back and said, "Oh yeah, look, I walked away with Christopher Columbus's wallet. Here you go, you can have it back."
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey Moses, you forgot your hat when I saw you.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm late. I've got Jesus' birthday present.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. Who knows? I mean, it's interesting. I dug it from when they first came out. I think it started 2009, 2010, and it's got they run away with it, but hey, more power to them, man. They made They really.
So what is the strangest? Not encounter, but strangest case that you've had
that I personally have had.
Yeah.
I've had so many of them. I don't know. I'm trying to think of one that makes.
I'll put you on the spot now.
Yeah, because I mean, I've had so many to try to think of them going back a while. I don't really know. I'm not really sure. I mean, the one I just recently had with the guy going home on the mountains, that was pretty interesting. I had a couple down on the coast which had multiple witnesses. That was pretty cool. And there was one where I had gotten a report where this person had told me that the craft that they had seen they were at a place called Modoc Lake, which actually is like a small lake off of a place called St. Matthews. And the craft had come down and she was on the shore with her, I believe it was her son and her daughter. And it was kind of like twilight, and the craft came down and it slowed to a point where they could look, and inside she swears anyway that she could see beings inside, these small beings inside walking around, and it kind of hovered there and then it left. So I mean that was kind of interesting, but then again, she didn't have anything to substantiate other than what she was saying about it.
Okay. So with like the alien descriptions, are most of them actually the greys? They're the traditional aliens that most people report, are they?
Yeah, so we had gotten a report not too well. I guess it was a long time ago, probably about a year and a half ago, where this woman reported. I guess it was through memory, kind of like she'd wake up, have these dreams, and so what kind of being was it? And she said it was, you're just run of the mill, tall, gray alien, and it's almost as if some of these descriptions of some of these beings are what we would kind of see in other. So if we believe that this is has anything to do with sleep paralysis or anything like that, well, then that would make sense, because you're dreaming and you, as a human, you're focusing on the way that a sentient being would look to you. It would kind of look human, when it would have a head, 2 eyes, and nose, and mouth, arms, and legs, and everything. But generally, that's the ones that you'll hear, or you'll see. Like if you go on MUFON, some places get quite a few more than we get. A lot of sightings here, a lot of crafts. We've only gotten a few ET type in the last, I would say 5 years. But there are some places that quite a few more, and really that's what you'll get is your generic gray or green alien, mantis type aliens, where mantis will be, whenever you see a mantis, you'll also see it in conjunction with a small gray or a small green or a tall gray alien. So if it's true, then they theorize that one is more of a control and the other ones are workers, type of like a beehive type thing.
Okay.
Right.
So I was going to say, is this where the theory comes from, that they're like working together in this conglomerate?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So they work together. So each one has a function. So some people theorize that the small green ones are more of an AI type synthetic being, like like almost like a robot or a cyborg or something, and that the tall grays are the scientific, the ones that are the doctors, the ones that are the scientists, and the mantis are like the overlords. They're the ones that fund and control everything, and then they go out to these destinations, and the little green ones will go out and gather up whatever they need, the people, the animals, whatever they want, and they bring it back in, and then the tall gray ones are the ones that will do the do the examinations and all that stuff, as the mantis watch from the opposite side of the room. And you get quite a few of the reports that I've read anyway. That's what they come in as, and stuff. So, and then you'll get some will be intermeshed with human-like individuals, but there are also theories behind that say, well, these beings are not necessarily humanoid. They don't look like humans, but they interact with you in a manner that they want to project the humanism on you, to hide what they truly are, because you probably be afraid. So they want you to be comfortable with the interaction, and so they make themselves appear to be something that will be comfortable to you, which would be another human being, like when people say the Nordics and these types of beings. Well, maybe they're not necessarily. That's not what they look like. They could look horrifying to us, but in order to make us comfortable, they appear to us to be this type of human. So I'm not sure. The abductions are one thing. Coming in contact, there are so few reports of humans actually coming in contact with anything off-world. So I don't think you could really get a true gauge on it yet, really, because there's not. I don't think there's enough data. I don't think there's enough experiences like that to really come up with a concrete conclusion on it. I think a lot of it has to do with sleep paralysis. And I think I told you, Richard, or was it Kerry, about my daughter, the time that she woke up in the morning and when I was getting ready for school. And, she's I'm Italian, so she's got that Mediterranean blood in her, and my mom's anemic. Both of my daughters are. She bruises very easily, and so I used to tease her. The aliens are going to come and get you. They're here, and I'll just wake up with bruises, and so she got up one morning, and I was getting ready to take her to school. I think she drove at that time, but I was getting her something to eat, and she kind of just looked a little upset, and I asked her what was going on, and she told me that 5 o'clock in the morning, she said she kind of woke to a feeling that there was something in the bedroom with her. Now, she slept with one of my pit bulls, and he was one of the pit bulls that would stare at the walls, and she kind of it started to make her nervous. She would say to me, he's staring at the walls. He won't come up the steps. He stares at the wall sometimes. He doesn't bark, but so, who knows what that was? The house is not that old, so there can't be anything as far as I live on, haunted land or anything. And so she said to me that she had this intense feeling that there was something in the room. And she said she rolled over at one point and tried to go back to sleep. And then she kind of sat up for a second, and she said she saw this being. Now, I had put a rack when I did her laundry, I did her delicates. I would hang them in her room on this rack I made for her so that they could hang dry. And she said that she saw something move behind the rack. And she said she put her face in the pillow, and she kind of looked back up, and she said she saw it standing there. She said it just went above the rack, which was probably about 5 feet tall. She said she could see it from like the mid face up, and it was, kind of lightish color face with it was wearing a black outfit with, light colored eyes, big light colored eyes. And she said she just yelled at it. She said, get out of my room, get away from me. And she said she turned back over, and it was gone. So could it be sleep paralysis? She woke up in the middle. She was in that REM sleep cycle.
Yeah.
And she wasn't quite out of sleeping yet, but her body. So, there's a lot of times I believe that that's what takes place with people, and their first inclination is, so if they come to me, I'll try to rationally discuss it with them. But if they go to an investigator who is a staunch abduction type investigator, well, then they might she might infer that she was actually either abducted or in the course of being abducted and happened to wake up. So I think it's all relative to the way you approach it and stuff like that also, So.
Do you think then that there will come a time when we have this first contact and we do get introduced to these aliens, or do you think it's a long time off yet?
I think that some people probably already have, and I go back to the Eisenhower, George W. Bush examples. I think that at some point in time, people have come in contact with something that has come and introduced itself for many reasons, many that we will never even know of. It's kept quiet. I guess to disclose it will do actually more damage than it will do any good. And, you could take it from the religious aspect to what some people, fundamental type religious organizations might think if we do that, would go all the way to how people would try to manipulate. I mean, could you foresee if there was disclosure and the fact that there are beings on this planet that some group would try to go and kidnap them and and try to get whatever they could of their tech from them? I mean, I could see that, and so I think it's a combination of we can't disrupt society too much. On top of that, we have some technology that's been given to us or helped us attain that we can't let other countries, possible belligerents, find out that we have this tech, and stuff like that. I don't know. Like I said, talking to a few people that claim to have contact with beings, they said that they are told that society's not ready for it, that we're not spiritually or mentally prepared to disclose this to a whole society of people.
Hmm. Okay. You said earlier that you got some books, and speaking of books, we know that you've actually bought our book. Have you read our book yet?
No,
What-
so I just finished. I had one book that I was just finishing, and so I got the book a couple of days ago. And as a matter of fact, I have it out at my bedside now because I'm going to start reading it tonight.
Oh, be very good read.
But
It will.
Don't get nightmares.
But I thought I was going to kick off I thought that I had finally dug my grave with Richard, because I got the book and I saw the two autographs, and then I went to the Paul Rook page and it was empty. So I said, "Oh man," I was like bored, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, "How far can I push this?" So
That was quite amusing.
So I took it.
That's exactly what I would have put as well.
Let me tell you something. I think I'm funny. So I was dying laughing when I did that. But then I saw I submitted it and it wasn't approved for like 2 days, and I'm like, Kerry must have got mad. She probably won't approve it, But then I don't think anybody saw what I had written for it right away.
Yeah, that's probably what it was.
because she had approved it, and then it was like hours later that she finally put a smiley face underneath the page where I had written that stuff.
No, that was good. Oh, yeah, that was funny.
Yeah. Oh man. But
we will have to rectify that for you.
Definitely.
Oh man.
Oh dear. So because we're coming up to the end of the show, before we do go, where can people get in contact with you if they have any cases they wish to discuss with you?
Yeah, sure. So I can give them my. I have a website. It's South Carolina. It's MUFON South Carolina, all one word, .com. And that'll take them to my email. But if they don't want to do that process, that's fine. My email is all lowercase, cdm.mufon.sc.ne@gmail.com. And they can always just, I get people, as a matter of fact, a person from British Columbia had, and someone from Pennsylvania had contacted me through my email. And she wants to talk about a sighting that she had that she videoed and sent me a copy of the video. And I kind of missed her back and forth a little bit, but hopefully I'll get in touch with her. And then the same with the person from Pennsylvania. They had come across my Facebook group and said that they had a sighting, but they just wanted to kind of throw it off me. So people do contact me, and I get back to them.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You could also go to our website as well, which is www.paranormalconcept.com. If you've got anything for Chris or any of our other guests, just contact us and we'll make sure they get it.
Yeah,
and also the same for any of us. If you've got any questions or want us to do a subject, just drop us a message through the website and we'll consider it.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
get
awesome.
all our listeners involved.
Yeah.
We always love a bit of feedback.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'll discuss with anybody that's willing to discuss it, And the way I look at it is, I have an opinion. Everybody else has an opinion. I'll never force my opinion down anybody's throat. I'll just tell you what I think.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's it. I mean, I don't know everything. I don't know enough about it. I know a little bit about a lot, and that's just about the size of it. So I enjoy interacting with people because I always learn a little bit about something when I talk to people. There's always something to learn as long as you
absolutely.
We're
always learning.
Yeah. Well, you guys are awesome, though, man. I'm so glad I came across you guys. Because I tell my girls, I said to them, because when I went to England the first time, my little one was I think she was 14, and you can drive here at 14. You get your learner's permit because my Suburban, my shifting key, there's a belt in there, and it snapped when I was at the airport, and I had to push it to get it out of the parking space. She had to drive home from Atlanta, which it's like the first time she really drove, but she was talking to me because when I take my cell phone there, you have to get a separate cell phone, and I wasn't aware of that. And my cell phone, even though it's Verizon, wouldn't work in England, so I had to use through Wi-Fi. And she's like, I can't believe you're in a whole different country and I'm talking to you. Like you're standing right next to me.
Well, on that bombshell, I think we've actually come to the end of the show.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you, Chris, for joining us
Thanks,
on the
Chris.
show.
It's
Absolutely
always a
fantastic
pleasure.
listening to you again.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. You guys
No
are awesome.
problem. We'll
Okay.
definitely have you out again at some point. And
All right.
so all that remains left to say is good night, everybody.
Yeah. And say hello to Kerry for me, all right?
Will do.
We'll do.
Good
All right,
night,
awesome.
guys.
All right. Good night. Good night.